All right. That's an odd thing. No, apparently my memory's filling up. Well, I guess we will make this quick. So, today we are talking about the Empress in our Battling the Zoldrake series, Fatty Files, whatever you want to call it. Very quickly, if you don't know what the Zoldrake is, that is a unconscious egregore that I believe I have discovered. Basically, it's the sum of all parts, psychologically and energetically, when it comes to things that keep people fat, keep people unhealthy, not eating right, things like that. We are attempting to use the tarot to figure out how the Zoldrake uses individual energies of cards against us, and then how we can then turn that around and use that same energy back against the Zoldrake. First, we need to start off with the Empress card in general and just talk about what it is exactly. So, the Empress energy is very much the mother of the tarot, right? This is the I call it like the sum purpose of feminine energy. If you are at all a feminine person, um, then this is kind of the archetype that you really want to aim toward. Also, this kind of has to do with an I would say an age, not really an age, but a phase of life, right? If you think about the moon cycles that are associated with uh, the maiden, the mother, and the crone type of thing, this is definitely the mother, right? We just got done talking about the high priestess, which is definitely that coming into age, talking about sort of the going from maidenhood into the mother type of stuff, right? So this talks about things like emotional empowerment. This talks about things like emotional stability. This talks about ruling with a guiding hand that is not iron fisted. Okay. In a nutshell, that's what the Empress energy talks about, right? Very queenly type energy, right? This is being in control of your life. Certainly being in control of that, uh, of the feminine side of your life, male or female or otherwise, right? Okay. Let's move on to how the Zoldrake uses that energy against us. All right. This one is tough for me because this happened to me as a child, and I'm not trying to say anything bad against my mother. Actually, my mother was awesome and is still awesome. But there's this thing that happens, especially with mothers who are overweight, right? Where they self-soothe using food when they come into stress. This is definitely for mothers who are in poverty, which for most of my life, well, my family was. I hate saying that because I'd say like lower middle class is how I always used to like shill it off, because I feel like, saying we were in poverty discounts all the hard work my parents did. But working poor is another a way to put that, right? So mothers who are kind of obese themselves and who, have poverty issues really hyper focus on the fact that their children are fed. Okay. Um, because food could be scarce, right? So giving that child everything that they want calorically makes the mother feel good and makes them feel like a good mother, right? They don't know if that child's going to get that cake again or that candy again, or at least it feels that way. So they allow the child or even encourage the child to have as much as they want whenever they want, right? Also, when it comes to like sort of that motherly energy, They don't want to push the child to be physically active. Now, this was not my case, right? My mother, I was always physically active as a child, but I've seen this happen with other people. It's like, oh, of course I want little Jimmy to be, happy, and all little Jimmy wants to do is eat and play video games, and that's okay. That's him. He's big boned. All this stuff that you hear, right? That's what the Zoldrake uses against us, okay? It's the loving nature through food that gets co-opted. Um, we live in a society, if you live in, America, Europe, anywhere that's, I I'm not going to say evolved, but that's sort of the vibe. Anywhere where food is readily available, you're not going to starve, right? Um, but when you're on that poverty threshold, it feels like you could, and thus you indulge more than you should and push this onto your children. And the mother Empress energy really wants to facilitate that hearth and home environment of safety. And the Zoldrake knows this, and they use it to push into excess. Now, this doesn't just happen when, that I've been talking about a mother and child scenario, but we all have to take care of ourselves, and we all have what I call the big voice and the little voice, right? Where we have to discipline ourselves. So in some ways, we are all our own mothers, our own fathers, all of this. And if you have that Empress energy inside of yourself too much of a degree, again, that was kind of built on this hearth and home must have caloric density in order to feel happy and full and safe, then you're more likely to let yourself indulge, right? This can be carried from your actual mother or your actual upbringing into how you take care of yourself, into your own self-speak and your own psyche. How can we then use this in turn against the Zoldrake, right? It's the understanding that, yes, nutrition is great and calories are great, but you have to understand what nutrition actually is. And you have to understand that we are operating on an ancient brain that wants food as much as we can. We need to understand that taking care of a child or taking care of ourselves is about restricting that, okay? Making hearth and home does not need to be calorically excessive all the time. And the big drive of the Empress energy is to make sure that people are taken care of and that yourself is taken care of, right? It's molding that energy to modern times, and it's molding that energy to understand that you're not going to starve and that you're going to feel better getting away from the hearth and the home and being outside and exercising, getting to the gym, those type of things. And you have to understand that this is true self-care. What the Empress energy I was just talking about with the hearth and home needs to be a perfect balance. If you think about, like, I always go back to in my head, kind of like medieval times or even before that, where the hearth and the home was super important because it was the seat of life for the family and for people, but you didn't get to stay there all the time, right? You had to go out, you had to work, you had to hunt, you had to gather, you had to build, you had to be outside of the home for the majority of the time. And nowadays, bringing in the idea of like screens and lethargy is that we think that we do need to be home all the time, when in reality it was basically on feasting days that you would hang out, or just a little bit of time during workable days, or maybe when the weather was just so bad that you couldn't be outside. Those are kind of accurate ideas. We want to carry forward and understand that hearth and home is not everything. Okay? And if hearth and home is given too much, it becomes poisonous. That sucks. I want to just go into the fact and say that, like, this is one of the hardest things for me, in probably the hardest thing for me in the weight loss journey and things like that. It's going to happen to me tonight as I record this. Like, I'm going to a family dinner, and I cannot bring myself to not eat at least some of what everyone else is eating, because I don't want to be disrespectful, because I cherish the idea of hearth and home so much, right? Probably a little bit too much. Is that everything that I need to say about this? I think that it is. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop it there.